Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my March book haul video. I have been really enjoying making book haul videos, and I try to buy from across several genres whenever I have the opportunity. And this month I was able to get a bunch of genres included. So why don't I get to, I believe I have 12 books, so I'll have to recount as we're going along. So first, I have a Star Trek book. It's my only Star Trek book on the list that I bought this month, so didn't buy too much of it, is Star Trek The Final Frontier by Diane Carey. No, this is not the movie novelization. This novel actually came first, I believe, and then the movie... This was a novel that was written, and then the movie just used the title Final Frontier, but actually totally different story. But I'm very excited. It's one of those, what they call like the giant novels. It's one of the ones that was a longer novel, much more to it. This is an older copy. As you can see, it's yellowing on the sides. So it's an older copy, but I'm very excited to read it because I've heard good things. And Diane Carey has been posting some interesting Star Trek opinions recently. So I'm excited about that. I also have some Star Wars books. I have two Clone Wars novels. The first Clone Wars novel I have is Star Wars Jedi Trial by David Sherman and Dan Cragg. And this novel I've heard mixed things, mostly bad. Like, people don't seem to hate it, but people don't seem to love it. Like, it seems to have like a kind of meh look to it, but I'm a completionist and I want to get into more Star Wars novels, more EU books. I'm in a group of friends who meets every once in a while over Twitter Spaces, and we get to hang out. And if you are part of that group, you know exactly who you are because we've been talking about the Star Wars Expanded Universe. And this group has made me like excited to talk about EU books again. So I'm collecting the books again, and hopefully we'll get to read them eventually. But there's so many new releases that it's hard to go back to Legends when there's so many new canon novels releasing. I also got Yoda Dark Rendezvous, which is another Clone Wars novel. This one I've actually heard pretty good things about, and I believe this one made it into the Essential Legends collection that was done recently. But it's a really fun book from what I've heard, and of course has a major focus on Yoda. So I am interested to see how that goes. The last Star Wars book I bought, this is like the most Star Wars books I bought in a while for a single month, is Barbara Hambly's Planet of Twilight. I've been interested in reading Barbara Hambly for a while because Brandon Sanderson has talked about how she wrote Dragonsbane, which is the novel that he points to as the book that got him into reading and got him into fantasy. But none of my local bookstores carry that book, and I just haven't had a desire to look online. However, this book, Planet of Twilight, was in my local bookstore, Barbara Hambly's Star Wars book. This is the third book in the Callista trilogy. I think you have like Children of the Jedi, and then you have Darksaber, which I have read and didn't think it was great. And then you have this book. And I haven't heard great things about this book, but hey, it's a Star Wars book. I'll try to read it and have fun. Really interesting cover design where it's orange, but then there's a tint of yellow between the sun on the back and also Leia's lightsaber. Very interesting choices that they made here with the design of this book. So I'm interested to see how it goes. We'll see if it's interesting. So that's all my Star Wars books and all my Star Trek. So let's go into some fantasy books that I bought. I bought two fantasy books, both by David Weber, author of the Honor Harrington series. The Oath of Swords and The War God Zone. I thought Oath of Swords was just a hilarious title because it is such a very, it's like a standard generic fantasy title. And then The War God Zone I was interested in because it was a sequel. And these look like short fantasy novels, which I'm excited to read because we need more shorter fantasy books. And also just because I like the publisher Baen, I like the author David Weber, so I was like, hey, I'll give these a shot. Next, I have some science fiction novels by Ben Bova. I have Jupiter and Venus. These are part of his big sci-fi series that he wrote. I have his Mars books, Mars and Return to Mars, and then I also have one of his, I think, either standalones or part of a series called Saturn. I think it's Saturn that I have. Yeah, Saturn. And so I got these because these have the same cover design as the one that I bought that's Saturn, and because I am interested in getting into this type of classic, not classic sci-fi, like modern sci-fi that has a classic feel to it. So I got these books. They're a little bit, this one's a little bit battered, but you know what? I'm excited to read them. And they're by Tor, which is the publisher I like. Next, I had a thing about two going. Two Clone Wars novels, two sci-fi novels, two fantasy novels, and now two young adult novels. And I have Partials and Fragments, both by Dan Wells. Dan Wells is fast becoming one of my favorite authors. I have been reading Dan Wells for a couple of years now. I loved meeting with Dan Wells. I love his podcast with Brandon Sanderson. I love a lot of things about Dan Wells. And every book he's written that I've read, which I've read 5 of his books, has been an absolute amazing book. And Brandon has talked about how Dan Wells is basically is like a primarily young adult author who happens to write some other genres. And I found that interesting because when I read his novel, Extreme Makeover and Ghost Station, those are adult novels. And then, of course, his I Am Not a Serial Killer trilogy features a young adult protagonist and other young adult characters. But to me, it just felt like an adult novel because of the themes it was dealing with. So it didn't feel young adult to me, even though it could be classified as such. But this is most assuredly young adult, and I read the premise of the book, and I was like, ooh, this sounds fascinating. I have not found book 3, the last book in the trilogy, but I will continue to try to hunt it down. So I'm very excited to read these books. I'm sure I will enjoy them because I love Dan Wells' writing. Next, I have 2 reference books. These are books that actually were kind of impulse buys. One of them was a panic buy, not just an impulse buy, a panic buy. And the panic buy was House of Steel by David Weber. And as this video comes out, I think I've already done this, so I have an interview with David Weber and the rest of his team that worked on his newest anthology, What Price Victory. And when I found out I was going to do that interview, I needed to read the book. And when I was doing that, I needed to do research. And I've known this book has been in my local used bookstore for years, basically. No one's bought it. I've known it's been in there, but I've never thought, I need to get this. But then when I found out about doing the interview, I was like, well, I need to get the reference book so I can use it. It wasn't exactly necessary for the book, which was for the book that I read, What Price Victory, which is good, but I still have it now. So I got it. It's got some interesting information in it, but not one I'm going to read straight through. Then I have the other reference book is The Writer's Market for 2014. I've always been fascinated with the writing business, and also one day I would like to become a writer. Now I'm sure some of the things, some of the information and contact information about publishers has changed. I'm sure that some of the tips about how to submit things have changed. But I think that the general ideas in this book, despite being 9 years old, are probably still pretty relevant. And so this is not a book that I'm just going to sit through and just, read through it line by line. But if I ever get into writing again, I might utilize this to try to figure out what, I might use this to figure out some answers to things. So I got this, it was literally $1 at the used bookstore, and I was like, it's worth it. It's worth the buy. So that's it. 10 new novels and 2 source books that I am very excited about owning. I cannot wait to dive into these eventually, although I have a bajillion other books on my TBR. But it's good that, I only bought really, if you discount the source books, 10 books this month. That's a pretty good average. That's my typical read-through rate, which means that I'm reading what I'm buying, so I'm not going overboard. So, back at the end of last year, I was buying 15, 20 books a month. That was crazy. So I've slowed down a little bit. So if you've read any of these books, let me know in the comments section down below what you thought of them. And if you have bought some books this month, let me know what books you bought. Let's discuss all these things in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.